going on?
Yep.
We are live. We are live. I'll wait for a few people to join us before we start the official intro, because we've got a few people with us. We've got Alex and Kevin, but we'll do a proper start up in just a couple of minutes, and we were just going through all the topics that we are going to be touching on. I say topics; it's a range of lots of things, isn't it? But yeah, just wait for a few more people to jump on, and then we'll get started. Hopefully, everyone's having a good time in the EV world, and there's most people are maybe on holiday at the moment. Who knows? But there we go. 6. That's a good start. Let's get cracking. So here we are. YEV, the new kind of format for Chargeheads Live, and yeah, simply YEV. We're going to be focused on a balanced focus around predominantly EV. Good evening, Foxanne Follies. How are we doing? Yeah, so I've got some team members, the A team, the EV team, if you like. I've got Alex Grant and Kevin Booker just down there. And yeah, really excited. We've already been having a really good chat about interesting news stories that are happening. So I thought what we could do is just start with an intro. Alex, because Kevin's not been on, Kevin's been on the live before, and anyone that's not watched that live stream, it's in the previous live streams. Alex might not know who you are. Tell them of your, magnitude.
I hate singing my own praises. I'm Alex Grant. I'm a motoring journalist of approaching 20 years now. Crikey, feels crazy even saying that. Initially sort of specialising in all things motoring. I've edited the launch of EV Fleet World magazine back in 2012, and kind of was then edited the UK magazine until I left to go freelance in 2018. But that's building off the back of a slightly different route in that I came to that magazine from Max Power. So I'm now a freelance journalist with, I guess, quite a broad editorial patch in that I specialise in electric vehicles, fleet, and modified cars, which I think is an interesting patch to be covering because it's quite varied.
It's a good mix. What years did you do Max Power out of interest?
So I was there for the final 2.5 years or so that it was around. So I was on the final team that packed the bags and walked out of the offices in 2010. So an interesting thing to have witnessed, having grown up reading it, and then had the opportunity to write for it. I still write for Performance VW magazine, so I'm still kind of involved in the modified community, and it's I love chatting to these guys about building the cars. It's a real highlight. So.
And just to highlight for people, Max Power, who doesn't know, because I know we've got a few viewers across the pond. Max Power is basically, it was the biggest modified car magazine out there, bar none. Check out Beasts from the East. That was one of my favorite things that came out of Max Power, and it was an amazing magazine back in the day. So yeah, Alex, honestly, it's fantastic to have you on board and all your experience. So this is really, really good, because I'm sure you're going to fill a whole load of gaps and holes in my knowledge, and really be a key part of YEV. Kevin, do your worst.
So I'm Kevin. You may have seen me before on this podcast. I kind of focus on everything efficiency. I have 1 or 2 Guinness World Records for John O'Groats to Land's End in Mustang Mach-E, and longest distance in a van to a single charge. And sort of my sort of professional background is kind of the fleet and charging infrastructure. Deployed quite a large amount of charging infrastructure in rural areas. So it's kind of all that world. But I've, again, come from a kind of petrol background. So I've had performance diesels, now moved on to performance electric vehicles. And I've always focused on trying to prove the art of the possible. So getting much further range out of them than they're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I was certainly doing that today on my hypermiling mission. But yeah, my name's Tim Aylan, started Chargeheads 2021, 17 years motor trade experience in selling and buying, and focused on EV and EV solutions the last 1.5 years. Massively passionate about the electric transition and making the best possible use of all that torque from the motor and creating exciting electric cars. That's what it's all about, whether it's modified or EV conversion. So I think that's enough of an intro for now. But if anybody's got any questions, please whack them in the comments. That's the beauty of the live. If you want to know where we are, what cars we have, whack it in the comments, and I'm sure we can answer them. I tell you what, that's a great place to start. What are we driving? So I'm driving Tesla Model 3, Rusty, long range. She's done 106,000 miles. Alex, what electric car are you driving currently? Or petrol?
So I have a mix. We have two electric and one petrol of varying terms on the drive. The longest term member is this one behind me. It's my 91 Polo G40, which I don't think I'll ever sell. We have, with 3 kids, we have a Peugeot e-Rifter that we used to get around in, which was seemed like a compromise between kind of the flexibility that we needed and actually being able to go electric at last. So we've had that for about 18 months, and I'm just coming to the end of a term driving the new Corsa electric long range, which I've got on very well with.
Very nice, very nice. I'm going to get a picture of the e-Rifter up there because even myself, I was like, what the hell is that when you first mentioned it? But while I'm finding the picture, Kevin, far away.
If you Google it, you'll probably get a picture of our car. If you find a blue e-Rifter, the picture of the one in the car is going to be our car, because it was they had a bronze one and a blue one, and ours is the blue one. It's the press car from all the press pics.
There we go. There's an e-Rifter for you. It's like a Berlingo multi-spas.
It's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's a slightly poshed up Berlingo.
Now we've got Andy's just added a question there. If money is no object, what would you get? Mine would be a DB5 EV conversion. Ooh, that would be flipping expensive. I don't know how much is a DB5 these days. They got to be
well into 7 figures, surely.
Yeah, plus the EV conversion. It depends on what power you want, Andy, mate. If the shopping list is there, you want Tesla power, you want it done properly with DC fast charging, just whack another 150 grand on there, and there's your money. But in terms of money no object EV conversion, of course it's a TVR, Andy. You should know that if you watch the channel. Alex, what about yourself? What EV money no object, what would it be for you?
I'm going to be pretty boring on this, and I'm going to say I'd probably go with the Taycan. I've actually yet to drive one yet, but I do quite fancy a go. I've got a bit of I've written a lot about Porsches, and I've got a real affection for the brand. So
there's the VW
hard thing to resist,
now, isn't it?
Yeah. Although in a slightly more real world sense, I've got a taste for high spec Polestar 2s, the kind of performance pack stuff with the gold Brembo brakes and the Olin suspension and the yellow seat belts and stuff. I'd be quite happy with one of those.
There's a nice modified one that's been wrapped in like a gold color. He's a Chargehead member, actually. Good guy. And that looks really smart. It goes with the calipers and stuff. Kevin, what are you thinking? What's your the EV dream?
See, I quite like the new Lotus one, the SUV one. And I kind of like it because it's the Lotus Electra.
Nice.
So it's the performance. I know it's wrong on many levels, the fact it's a Lotus and it's an SUV, but I kind of, because if you got rid of the EV side of it, I still quite like the styling of the Lamborghini Urus, and I think the Lotus looks a bit like that, being an electric car. I quite like an angry, aggressive looking performance car.
You don't look like you'd like an angry car, Kevin.
Well,
knowing about your efficiency roots,
Alex, who's known me for quite a while, will know some of the color choices of my previous cars that I've had.
I think the first thing you turned up in here was a highlighter yellow Toyota Aygo. Although I do think I remember your C-Class. Not here, but yeah.
It was the most boring one. I've had like Lumine. I've had the bright green in a Seat. I've had the orange in a Seat Leon FR, and I've had the yellow in a Seat Leon FR. And my first brand new car was a broom yellow Punto Sporting when I was in my last year of uni.
Sounds like I need to wear a pair of sunglasses when you turn up in your next EV ride, Kevin. Foxan Follies, but did you realise how money no object the TV would be when you started? It's a very good point. No, it's probably the answer to that. But I think that's a pretty good intro. Like I said, if anybody's got any other questions about what got us to where we are at the moment in terms of the world of the EV and stuff, then, you know, whack it in the comments. Like I said, that's what it's there for. Or when you're watching it back later, put it in the comments. We'll do our best to answer it later. I thought what we could do is start with stories in the press, because there's been some really interesting stories coming out about EVs. Where shall we start, guys?
Might as well go alphabetically. Let's start with the Audi, yeah.
Yes, Audi. Right. Okay. Let me share my screen, and I will. So yeah, what is coming out on the Audi world then, Alex?
Well, the staple Audi upper executive car, the A6, has been reinvented as an electric car, including exciting stuff, an estate. I see a long range Audi. I've always had a bit of I guess it's a Volkswagen Group thing again coming out, but I've always had a bit of a thing for Audi estate cars, and a long range electric Audi estate, right up my alley. Saloon one, although I think it looks more like an A7 in profile. So the saloon one can do up to 470 miles WLTP, which is wow. I think beyond the range of most people's bladders. And we're getting up to a 543 horsepower S6, which will hit 60 in 3.9 seconds. Again, okay. quite appealing, and lots of pictures of camouflaged, and lots of rumours are going around about RS6 versions as well, which could be quite interesting.
I mean, surely if it's an RS6, they've got to be beating on the door of 2 seconds, haven't they? Realistically,
got to be, yeah. It's going to be a really interesting car. 800 volt charging, 270 kilowatt max. I think that could be quite a.
Wow, is that what it is on the normal A6?
Yeah.
Wow, that is really good.
So they've again. I mean, I people kind of ask, well, if you were doing long haul distances and stuff, what would you be defaulting to in terms of kind of the complete package in terms of kind of a long range EV? And I think I'd usually go Ioniq 6, and just I'm a bit restricted in that sense, in that I probably want a little bit more space in the back for the kids. But if I was going up and down the country, the combination of 800 volt charging, super efficient slippery shape, and like a long range, decent sized pack, But then I think this is going to be quite an interesting, and it's a size bigger, but an interesting kind of addition to that list of cars. It's harder and harder to resist, doesn't it? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, but I was going to say, before I ask Kevin the most important bit, which I know he's really excited to tell us, is the fact that I'm really worried that this guy in the video is touching this Audi a bit too fondly. I don't know if anyone has noticed that. It's a bit of a worry. But Kevin, go on. I know you're dying to tell everyone.
See, the thing I like about this is its drag coefficient. So it's actually the same as the Ioniq 6, 0.21. So that should make it a bit of a game changer on efficiency. I mean, the one thing which will probably happen, which I bang on about, is it'll probably have massive wheels. So what they give with one hand, they'll take away by putting huge rubber on it, which actually does that. But then if it's an A6, they're likely to do quite a fleety spec one, which will be the smaller wheels for those people who want to go that long range, but still want the German Audi badge on it.
Yeah.
So you can't. You can take the max power out. You can take the boy out of max power, but you can't take the max power out of the boy. I'd still have the big wheels. I just spend a bit longer charging.
I've had, for the first time of many live videos, my dad has actually interjected, holding the golf putting pole there. Carwell have apparently just renewed. Reviewed both compared to the Merc and BMW. I'm going to go and have a look at that. Thanks, Pops. So we've got another message here.
Yeah.
I do love an estate car though. I'd like an MG5 if it could tow more than 500 kilograms. I would have thought we'd be able to tow better than that. Obviously not.
We've rung the range out of an MG5, haven't we, Kev?
Yeah, that reminds me of a road trip we did.
1,700 miles we did, in just under 3 days. Sorry, go on. I butted in a little bit there, but go on.
No, not at all, mate. Not at all. I didn't have anything to say other than, as soon as though the video has finished, I thought we could maybe move on to the next one. Which, if we're going in alphabetical order, it's going away from VAG for a minute and going to one of my favorite Korean brands, which is the Kia, the EV3. And as I slowly and slickly put the new video up, get the new press office information. Hang on a second, just bear with. I did say it was going to be slick. I was wrong. Here we go. And the picture's gone. So there it is. Everyone see that?
EV9.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's the one.
EV3. So this is funnily enough, since then my dad actually jumped on. It's a car that I was recommending to him in terms of value for money, range, and everything else. Although it doesn't have the high voltage infrastructure architecture, and it doesn't have an LFP battery. However, at 32,995, which is about, I think it's about £8,000 less than the Kia Soul, which it replaces. It does look pretty good value, and we know it's going to be good. I mean, it's a Kia electric car. Yeah, they're great.
I mean, its efficiency is going to be, all the Kia Hyundai products are really good on efficiency. So you'd expect a real world range pretty close to WLTP, if not higher than it.
If it feels like an EV9 but downsized, it's going to be a really special car. I'm a big fan of the EV9. There's a lot of big things that you can link to the. There's a lot of big things you can link to the EV9. It's a huge thing. I realised that when I had it, this one that I had on the drive weighed as much as me sat in the Polo if it was on the roof bar of the Rifter. So the three of us combined weigh about as much as the EV9 that I had. But it's a lovely thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of stats in here. They've got the 55 kilowatt hour usable battery one, which range I think is sort of 325 kilometers. So it's about what's that?
267 miles.
Yes, WLTP. So I suppose our argument would be the realistic range is going to be sort of low 200s as a kind of a general thing. Although I'm sure Kevin would probably get about 400.
I'm looking at those figures now and seeing the 81 kilowatt hour one. The interesting thing is they are doing the air spec with the bigger battery, which means it's likely to have the smaller wheels on it, which is, I reckon that's realistically somewhere you'll get 400 miles range out of it. And at that price point, that's an immense,
it's an impressive car. Range. Yeah.
To be fair, it's wise to point out here when Kevin sees the WLTP range, he laughs in the face of it. Whereas I just laugh at the WLTP range only because I always think I'm going to get less, knowing how heavy my right foot is. But Kevin, with his light foot and efficient driving, go on, give us an example. I think this is quite important to highlight to people. Can you give us a WLTP range of a vehicle and how much you've managed to extract out of it before?
So just the example, just driving at the moment I'm in a Mustang Mach-E, just driving it normal sort of speeds, not really trying. The WLTP is 372 in the extended range one, and I'm getting 450 out of it without really trying, which is, I mean, my Ioniq 5, I'm getting, if I don't get a good 30 to 40 miles more than WLTP, I'm disappointed. So even the EV9 I had on test, that was pretty close to a 400-mile range car. I mean, that's a big brick-shaped vehicle. It's almost like, I don't know, it's a challenge. I mean, even to be fair, even my wife's quite efficient at it. She's got over 320 out of a facelifted Hyundai Kona. So
it just goes to show, doesn't necessarily, WLTP is right for some people and wrong in both ways for others. So it just depends, and obviously weather and all those other things, of course.
It's always difficult in a lab to simulate real road use because everyone drives differently,
and whether it rains, of course. It's a good point. We talk about range here. I drove to Cheltenham and back. We can talk about what we've been doing in a minute, which is the reason why I was driving to Cheltenham and back to go clean the EV. But my car charged it to 80%, said 222 miles. I didn't do 200 miles, and I drove it sensibly on the way there with the aircon on, and on the way back, I had to hypermile it with the aircon off to get to a certain place on time because I was already late to pick up Rebel, who's collapsed down here. So maybe the rain would have affected it. There are all these variables that do come into play, aren't there? So. But yeah, that's me rabbiting on. What's the next vehicle? So we've got e-transporter.
Yeah, that's the e-transit porter, as you can. It's
So what's the headlines of this Alex? Because I think you've got a bit of information on this one.
Yeah, so this is part of Ford's collaboration with Volkswagen. That means there's quite a bit of sharing going on. So on the EV front, you've seen the Explorer and the slightly controversial Capri using the MEB electric vehicle platform. And then within the van range, you've got the Caddy, which is shared and becomes the Transit Courier or Connect. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. Sorry, that's Transit Courier. And then you've got the Transit Custom next size up, which is this one, which is sorry, I'm waffling myself now. It's very, very hot in the garage, by the way. So if you see me gulping water and stuff, I'm absolutely boiling in here.
We're not going to complain, okay? We're not going to complain. But
your standard mid-size Transit there's a kind of a collaborative thing where they're sharing it with Volkswagen, and this is very closely related to the new Transit, which means that the Transporter, as we would have known it, has been split essentially into 3 vehicles this time around. So you've got whereas with the T6 generation Transporter, you would have had the Transporter Electric, which is an ABT conversion, and then you would have had the Caravelle, which is the kind of passenger carized version. This new T7 Transit is Transporter is split into 3. So you've got the ID Buzz, which is kind of in the vein of the Transporter, although it's not directly related. The Multivan, which is based on a car but looks like the old Caravelle, but isn't at all related to the Transporter, which is this one, which is Ford based. So it's available with diesel, plug-in hybrid, and electric. And the electric is available with 3 power outputs: 136, 218, and 286 horsepower, and a 64 kilowatt hour battery. So an interesting vehicle. It'll be interesting to see why. See how people receive it, because obviously Transporter's got quite a heritage, and people can be fussy about brands, I guess. But I think it looks good. I think the new Transit looks good, and I think this looks like a nice step forward for it. So.
No, it will be interesting, as you say, the controversy of it, because Transporter fans are Transporter fans. Will they accept a Transporter that's now a Transit? Looking at that, because I've been in the new Transit Custom, and looking at that interior, there's very little that's changed. It is genuinely looks like the Ford interior. It's got the same Ford Sync system, and the screen's the same. It'll be interesting how some of those features go across, because I know the Transit version is quite clever. They've got a new feature called Sync Up. So whereas before, if you had additions like flashing orange lights and everything, they'd have separate buttons you drilled into the vehicle. Now with the Ford Sync Up system, they can all be operated from the onboard screen. So you can have lots of add-ons, and it still integrates with the OEM screens. So there's no drilling holes or anything. It's just purely integrated over the CAN bus to be able to operate it from the touchscreen.
Well, the whole Ford Pro ecosystem is fascinating. It'd be interesting to see how much Volkswagen can. I'm assuming Ford, because a lot of the Ford Pro stuff is multi-brand, but how much Ford enable Volkswagen to offer, if any, because they may just offer the van and let Volkswagen do their own connected services. But all the Ford Pro connected stuff is really good, really interesting, really clever stuff. Just kind of fleet management side of things.
The new Capri, of course, is based on the ID4. So all these. It's interesting to see that. I would have never have thought that Ford and VW would be sharing platforms like this. If you said to me 10 years ago, I wouldn't believe it.
Have you ever heard of the Volkswagen Apollo?
No.
That's an interesting one. If you Google it, you might recognize it as something else.
Okay, I'll bring it up in a second. Just a couple of live comments in here. Mod Scotsman, the previous e-Transporter can be picked up cheap for around 11k, rubbish range at 80 miles, but there's someone working on an upgrade conversion pack. Yes, and I know the person, ironically. I don't get 80 miles out of it, though, from what I've heard. It's pretty awful. Anyone from Foxhound Follies, anyone know why EVs are so underrated for towing? I'm pretty sure that e-Rifter could safely tow as much as the Berlingo, yet rated as half that. It's a good question.
I wonder. There's a lot of things out there about range changes and stuff. I mean, there seems to be a fairly consistent. You lose almost half the range, and in an e-Rifter, that's not going to take you very far between charges, and at which point you'd have to unhitch a trailer in order to charge the thing. Some EVs can tow an awful lot. I mean, I think that the Model X has got the largest tow. It's the best part of 3 tons. I think you can tow with a Model X, and you've then got enough range to actually unhook it. And the EV9 as well. The 4-wheel drive versions of the EV9 can tow a lot, and the EX90 as well, but the 2-wheel drive ones can't. I've seen some stuff where people are saying that it's partially because of regen, but I don't buy that. You can do a lot of stuff with regen, dialing out regen with software, and you wouldn't need to unsettle the trailer. It just doesn't add up to me. I suspect it's a range related thing and just an expectation of use.
I believe with the new Kangoo, they've matched the towing capacity of the van version, the electric version, to the fuel version. So that would be interesting, because that's kind of one of the newer generations of electric vans, isn't it? So it's much newer than the Stellantis product. It is a ground up one. It's obviously the Mercedes and the Nissan. So and that's got some quite clever features, which surprised me.
It's interesting. I mean, you'd say about the Model X, I didn't realise the towing capacity was as high as that, but I did bump into this chap. He must have been circa 70 years old, probably a bit older than that, and he said that he took his Model Y and caravan all the way down to the south of France every year, and he has no problems at all, which is always good to hear, especially all the negative press around towing on electric vehicles.
Oh, you can absolutely do it. The issue is that the charging network is generally, apart from the grid serve forecourts, so generally speaking, you kind of nose or bum into them to charge, and you usually end up having to unhitch whatever you're towing before you can charge, which is a fault of the infrastructure rather than a fault of the vehicles. Well, with the vehicles themselves, perfectly capable of doing it. So
with the truck infrastructure coming in with Z, all the ZEV, all the zero emission heavy goods vehicle infrastructure that's going in, that should hopefully sort that all out. Which would be nice. What's this we got here? Good on Renault, as long as it's safe. I really don't mind how many times I have to charge, as towing is an occasional use case. Yeah, I think it's for most people. But then again, we've got the commercial aspect where it is literally an everyday case scenario. So having chargers like those Kempower ones with the cables, you can cable management with the long arms and the long cables really do help with that. Or just the drive-through ones, obviously a lot better. So I think we're going to see more and more of that as time goes on. I thought what we could do before we get into talking about it's not a specific topic that we decided to choose today, because it's more of an intro, just give everyone a bit of a flavour about what YEV is going to be all about. Covering latest stories and the news and topics and our own stories as well, which I'm sure we'll get onto. But I thought we could now move on to what we've been doing. So, Alex, we'll save you to the end, because then you can lead into what we talked about earlier. But Kevin, what were you doing?
So obviously they'd seen the London to Brighton EV rally, where we all met and decided to sort of do this podcast. But speaking of EV rallies, I've been on quite a few of them. So a couple of weeks ago, I did the Green Fleet one, which I was in Team Europe car, which actually gave me an opportunity to drive quite a wide range of EVs. So ranging from, on day one, Mercedes EQE, which nice car. But I mean, the thing with that, I thought, is there really a story? Because saying a car that costs £100,000 can do over 300 miles to a charge isn't really a matter. You kind of expect it to be able to. Similar to, I drove the Skoda Enyaq, again, 300-mile range EV, no issues at all. The ones that I found were the most challenging and the more fun was actually the Renault Kangoo van, because I'd driven the old Renault Kangoo van, and it was of its time, shall we say. It didn't go very far. It lacked things like rapid charging. The new Kangoo van is a game changer. It's only got a 45 kilowatt hour usable pack, but the one thing that its thing that it does, which a lot of vans don't, it has 22 kilowatt onboard AC charging as well as CCS. And if you're in sort of that last mile delivery, that being able to charge back up to 50% again in about an hour on just a 3-phase supply is a bit of a game changer. and
Great for
efficient
depots,
drive.
isn't it? Yeah.
It felt a lot like the Zoe to drive. There were a lot of bits off the Zoe, the typical Renault bits from the air conditioning and stuff, but generally it was a really nice van, and it surprised me. So I had more fun driving that because it harked back to the days when they were a bit more of a challenge to do those distances. But over the week we covered 1,500 miles with no issues, even with the van. And that 22 kilowatt charging saved us a lot of times over some of the other vans, because if there was a 3-phase charger, we could stop for an hour when there was an event on or one of the challenges, and we'd be back up 50%, which was a really good game changer. The other one, which was really nice.
Just quickly, there's a question about the Kangoo. Do you think there is like a multi-spas Citroen Berlingo?
Well, there's already a crew van version of it, so that's pretty close to being the multi-spas type one.
I don't know.
Yeah, because I looked and you can order the crew van. So
what was the other thing that you talked about before we went live? Go on, you far away.
Yeah, the other interesting thing was, which not a lot of people expected, they had the new Mercedes E-Actros there, which actually broke the record for the charging speed at GridServe Norwich. It pulled 349 kilowatts.
Wow,
so and it did that.
Do you know what charger it was?
Which charge? As in it was one of the ABB ones at GridServe.
Oh, okay. But
the advantage of that truck as well is it supports the MCS charging standard, which goes up to 1 megawatt charging.
Yeah.
I mean, the difficulty, again, like we were saying about with trailers, is there wasn't many places it would fit without unhitching, which obviously moving forward, you don't want to unhitch your 42-ton trailer to actually go and charge. But with the charging stuff, I know a lot of people say that trucks have to go 1,000 miles without charging. But what people think is there's a lot of routes. So your DPDs, where they're fixed routes, where all you need to be able to do is travel enough distance for a driver's tacho time.
Yeah.
And then charge up quick enough in the tacho break. Because actually
that 45-minute break is absolutely key.
Yeah. And you think an MCS charger with 1 megawatt, that'll easily fill the battery. I mean, to put it in perspective, just compared to a car, the E-Actros was running a 650 kilowatt hour battery pack.
What was the usable on that? I'm guessing that was total.
That's the usable, apparently.
It's definitely LFP, though. I know that from dealing with Daimler when I was working for an essential EV company.
Interesting with lorries. I interviewed a few parcel and postal fleets late last year, and they were saying that the interesting thing with lorries is that unlike vans where you start with the shorter routes, with lorries you want to find the routes where they're as long as possible between a longish charging stop. So the DPD, I think it is, DPD Switzerland are using an electric truck to go up over the Alps. They're doing a transalpine route, and they have a charger at each end, and while they're loading it, they charge it, and then they stick it. And they said to make the cost, the TCO add up, the total cost of ownership add up, they started with their longest range vehicles where they knew they could do it within the range of the battery. But if you think about what's involved in a transalpine route, where it's kind of snow, steep climbs, and all the rest of it, and you've got an EV going up and down and making a good business case for itself. There's some quite exciting applications, I think, for EVs in trucking if you can deploy it right.
Because I did think that maybe for heavy, hydrogen would be the answer, but actually seeing now how things like that E-Actros perform, I'm thinking, well, actually, battery technology's even gone on to the level of that. And just to bear in mind, on that EV rally, that truck was fully laden with a trailer, and it didn't struggle at all.
What total range was there? A total range they got out of it in the end with the?
It was doing about 0.8 miles per kilowatt hour, so you're talking 400 mile range. It's not an awful range on it.
No, not at all. I think the use case, and if anyone's not seen it, please check out the hydrogen versus electric HGV video I did at RTX. That in China, the heavier goods, it depends on the use case, but the heavier goods hydrogen was more suited to. However, I think what it really boils down to is if they've got the infrastructure nearby, which is going to be cheap renewable electricity, to change into hydrogen, then that's where I think the use case is there. But in this country, I don't really think that there's going to be many use cases for it because of, the country is not exactly that big. It's not the whole of Europe, is it? So
I'm quite open-minded about hydrogen. I think there's a couple of things come to mind. Firstly, that in the same feature I was just talking about, the operators I spoke to said that the thing that held them back with hydrogen at the moment is a lack of vehicles that fit their use cases. It's kind of specific truck styles that they were after, and kind of trailer systems, and they were not available for them. But I think hydrogen could be quite interesting in trucking. It's interesting if you talk to all the manufacturers; they've all quite an open mind about using it. Because I mean, basically, it means they can share the EV, most of the EV powertrain, just downsize the battery and stick a fuel cell in it instead. So I think it could be quite interesting seeing how that happens over the next few years. But interesting what you say about infrastructure. I think it was Daimler, and don't shoot me if I'm wrong. They did a long range test and drove a hydrogen truck into the middle of Berlin. I think it was late last year. But they had to tow it out because there was nowhere to refuel it when they were in Berlin. So it did a really impressive long range on one refueling, but on one full tank of hydrogen. But then they had to tow it back out. I'm quite pro hydrogen in certain applications. I think it could be quite interesting, and I'm not, I think it's a shame to be closed-minded about it. But I think it's got a long way to come in terms of infrastructure and so on. I think I'm interested to see how that develops.
I've opened my mind to it a little bit more. I think it just, like I said, depends on the use case, the challenge with the infrastructure, and obviously the cost as well. So I think time will tell. I think that's the kind of key.
And I think cars are going to be secondary to other things in that. I mean, there's already marine applications, and I think if hydrogen is going to take off anywhere, it will start off in large vans and trucks and then filter down. I don't see it starting off in cars, and don't see it coming into cars in a meaningful way for a long time.
I don't ever see cars, to be honest. But what Mod Scotsman says, hydrogen isn't a solution. It's already a decarbonisation problem. Only once the uses in industrial place with green hydrogen should it even be contemplated by it. And I think this is, and I mentioned it in the video that I did, is I think a lot of people that are pro electric are worried about hydrogen, that the fossil fuel companies are going to be using non-green hydrogen, turquoise, grey, blue, and all the other colours, which clearly is just, what's the point? It's not about reducing. I'm not going to say CO2 emissions. It's not about reducing the harmful gases, and the environmental impact essentially, and efficient. It's all about efficiency in my mind. But I reckon that is a really good topic to talk about in detail another time, because I thought we just, because we can go very, very hard and heavy into hydrogen another day, I'm sure. Was there anything else that you've been getting up to, Kevin, this week, other than the multiple rallies that you seem to be doing? We need to do our own one soon, Kev, for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing that these EV rallies show. The problem I found with them is they're all great, but generally they're all brand new cars on there. And I think there's a place to show that actually some of the, just to, take, for example, someone taking a 2019 Hyundai Kona on it, to show that actually that car can do exactly the same as some of these newer ones. And it's a much lower price point for entry. I mean, obviously it's understandable that there's sponsorship involved, so you want to show off your newest product.
Yeah.
But I mean, the one person who did bring some older vehicles on there was a guy called Neil, who runs Power, the charging card network.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they had an older Zoe, and the one which I thought was going to be a big challenge for them, they had an ENV 200. So a CHAdeMO charging car, and that did it all as well. And that actually was one of the more efficient vehicles on the rally, because they had to drive efficiently because there's just there's not as much CHAdeMO infrastructure out there. I mean, it's sad to say that actually that's probably what's going to hurt the older Nissan Leafs, is the lack of charging infrastructure.
Having one of those conversion things on standby. And just for the benefit for people who aren't watching it and maybe listening to it, Mod Scotsman's put, have a look at the Spitfire research reports on the use of hydrogen. I'll certainly have a look at that myself as well.
That too.
Would be fun Foxhound Follies would be fun to upgrade some of the early EVs, like the 90s e-Berlingo. Lingos. Well, we do know, I'd certainly know of a company that are doing battery upgrades for ENV 200. More information on that, I'm sure, will come. but I don't want to. Not sure if I should be divulging at this stage, so I'll leave it under my hat for now. But no, that sounds great, Kevin. That's what I love. You're really in the thick of it when it comes to the efficiencies and all the tests, because you are the man to come to for eking out all the efficiencies.
And I'm dragging Alex into that in a couple of weekends' time with the Leamani Cup. So that's a challenge. Well, basically, it's got cars for the last 100 years in it. So we'll be up against things like a steam-powered car. The steam-powered car is not quite what you'd think the steam-powered car would be. So you'd think it would be like burning solid fuel. It actually burns petrol to heat a furnace, to then create steam, to then drive it. So if you think about efficiency losses, it's so inefficient, the fact that you're actually boiling water with petrol to make movement. But then there's going to be a few Teslas and stuff on it. But the interesting thing, it's not miles per gallon or miles per kilowatt hour in the conventional sense, because the original Rally, it was miles per kilowatt hour, or miles per gallon per ton. So as you can see, it can be quite advantageous in some of them. If you took an EV9 on it, you're going to have quite a high miles per kilowatt hour per ton because it's quite heavy.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, in terms of what I've been up to, as I mentioned earlier, I've been to Cleveland EV today. I took Rusty down there because there were far too many squeaks, and I did feel the suspension was getting a bit ropey. So I had a few bits replaced on Rusty, but there's other exciting things that, when I say exciting, I mean challenging things which I need to sort out, which will be coming out in the video next week. So check that out. As some will see, I put a short video out yesterday, which was me fitting a spoiler, because the kind people at EV Base sent me a spoiler, and there's a 20% discount code off. Loads of Tesla aftermarket stuff. So check it out. Discount code's Chargeheads. So that's ongoing. The spoiler, that will be into another episode as well. So that's what I've been doing, taking the old spoiler off. And so it's currently naked, which is good for efficiency, because like I said, I didn't have enough range to get back from Cleveland EV today, hence why I'm a bit hot and sticky after the journey today. Went to pick up some body parts for the electric TVR, which Ralph tells me that the MOT is going to be in a few weeks. And I might have said that last week, but we're still in weeks and not months. So there is progress. And me putting out the Skywell video, which I accidentally put out on a Saturday instead of the normal Wednesday because I was still feeling ropey. That's my excuse. The Skywell BE11, which I think there was some more information that came out of that today. So check that out. So that's what I've been up to, and also trying to sort a job. So because I've been off work on the garden leave for the last 2 months. So watch this space. Hopefully I'll have some good news on that soon. Kevin's been so bored. He's gone out. We've lost him.
Back again.
So that leads me nicely to Alex. Alex, what have you been up to?
Well, I've spent a load of money on supercharging, and I'm having a charging issue. And ironically, none of that is related to electric cars in this instance. I've just had a supercharger rebuild on this one in the background, which is a bit of a cottage industry now. Lots of favours involved in doing it.
He had me going for that.
And it's come back at a service, and 2 EVs and an ICE vehicle on the drive, and the only one that's having trouble charging is this one. The alternator's a little bit weak on it, so not a big deal, but it's something to do with. On the EV front, I have actually spent some money on supercharging. In that I my brother came over to visit from Norway the other week, and our e-Rifter got put in on a hard shift for the weekend. We did 700 miles in 48 hours, most of which was within two two-day slots. It's a vehicle that will do.
What's the realistic range?
Officially 169, 155 to 160 on a good day, mostly city miles. On the motorway, 130-ish. It's dragging a brick through the air. But it's a relatively small battery. I mean, we're often traveling with 3 kids in tow. So by the time I've plugged it in, taken the kids in for something to eat, I'm kind of going, oh my God, it's at 90-something%, going out and unplugging it to free up the charger. discovered that at Reading it's significantly cheaper to use the Tesla chargers there. So I've kind of my muck-covered van got lined up against a load of much shapelier Tesla vehicles, but did put in a good shift on that front. And then it's Stellantis stablemate. Kevin and I did the London to Brighton EV rally. This is sort of stemmed out of a conversation. The kind of conversations we have on WhatsApp, I was like, hey, Kev, this car's pretty efficient. I wonder what you could get out of it. And it kind of trickled away in the background. And Kev goes, there's the EV rally, London to Brighton rally. Do you fancy trying it in that? I was like, that's not a bad test. So we kind of tried, a compromise, gentle but making good progress, and we did quite well, didn't we, Kev?
Yeah, I mean, we were over 5, was it? What was the
6.2, I think it came out as on the calculations there. Nice. We beat the Microlino, so I think that's not bad going for the little Corsa. I'm a big fan, actually. I think the Corsa, the Corsa E with the long range, or actually if you can live without the sort of 30 odd extra miles of range, the standard range Corsa E is a nice little car now. I'm always there's a lot of kind of new names and kind of novel body styles and all sorts of other bits and pieces coming out. The Corsa just feels like a very ordinary car in a good way. Like for lots of people, it's more car than they as much car as they'll ever need. And it's a great little car.
Because as soon as I hear Vauxhall, I think of fires. Maybe from Zafira, because I saw a video recently of a Tesla camera. It's someone who had his Tesla cameras on, and he goes, "Oh, and a van went past me on fire." I was like, "That's not a van. That's just a Vauxhall Zafira, of course." Yeah.
Well,
but reliability. I've never been that trustworthy with Vauxhall.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of Stellantis. So, I mean, it's going to be proven stuff. It's the same, same kit that you get in an E208 and various other vehicles now. It's, I wouldn't be too worried about that. Our we had a C4 Picasso as our last family car, and aside from the fact that it wasn't electric or plug-in hybrid, which would have actually suited us quite well in terms of the range that car, the sort of journey profile that car was doing. It was faultless. We had 4 very easy years out of it. Not an issue at all. And I just think I quite happily trust the new Stellantis stuff to last. Seems to be pretty well built to me.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned in the Zafira as reminding you of an interesting place that Alex is probably better to explain, where there's one on display where you wouldn't expect a Zafira.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Pray tell.
The original Zafira was developed by as an engineering project by Porsche. So there's one in the Porsche Museum in Stuttgart.
Oh my God!
A Mark 1 Zafira, yeah.
Wow.
So this is back in the days before the Porsche was coining it in on SUVs. And it was one of their projects that they were commissioned to do was to develop the Zafira for Vauxhall. So it's an interesting link, or rather Opel Vauxhall. So they've got one in the Porsche Museum.
Now, I think we were leading on to a slightly less electric orientated conversation. Then what was it you were doing recently, or what was it that you were kind of looking into? The fuel thing.
Yes. No. So there's a lot of conversations going on post-election about the EV deadlines in the UK, which I think is a bit misguided and a little bit kind of there's an over focus on the EV side of things, when actually in the UK the deadlines for EVs haven't changed. It's 80% cars, 70% vans by 2030, and as yet there's been no change to that at all. The only issue is that hybrid is no longer a requirement from 2030 to 2035, but if you're talking about less than 20% new cars, it's not really making a big deal. But it's interesting seeing what's going on in Europe at the moment. So Ursula von der Leyen has just confirmed that Sorry?
Who's she? Ursula von der Leyen.
She is the president of the European Union. I'm going to get her title wrong. Sorry.
Okay. Sounds like someone with a fantastic stein of beer, if I'm being completely honest, which I could do with right now, a nice cold one. But sorry.
I'm just trying to imagine if she'd be into that or not. But they're looking into having an allowance for zero carbon e-fuels from 2035. Which is an interesting one for new cars. So, in other words, not having a full combustion engine ban on new vehicles, but allowing vehicles that run on. So, there's a bit of discussion about this last year. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of kind of people getting very excited about how this might save the combustion engine, and I don't see that at all. It's interesting if you look at press materials and announcements from people who are actually making e-fuels, even they don't see it as a solution that would mean that you wouldn't need EVs anymore. They all seem to be moving in the direction of EVs. For passenger cars, it works. But you can use e-fuels for things like aviation, marine, HGVs, and things like that if you need it for that, and also keeping old cars.
Absolutely.
Decarbonising those. The issue is, I always say this with e-fuels, it's all very, from a regulatory point of view, it's all very well taking the carbon out of it. But if you take a solar plant and you split the power output of the solar plant into three, right? So you supply an equal amount to an EV charger, an electrolyzer to make hydrogen for a fuel cell vehicle, and then you also need an electrolyzer and other bits and pieces to make e-fuels in the third. So you split the energy equally three ways. Now, of those three vehicles, if you're locked in a garage with them when they're running, only one of those will kill you. So from a regulatory point of view, should there be an allowance for e-fuels? Possibly not in new cars. I don't really see it happen. I don't really see it spread into the UK. I think it's a useful tool for helping to kind of bring down the climate impact of older vehicles. I don't see it having a big role in new cars at all. And I don't see that regulators are going to get behind something that's got that kind of air quality issue attached to it. So I just, I'm not a big believer in e-fuels making a big dent in the transition to EVs at all. I'm excited about them for what I want, but not as a wider solution.
I was really enjoying the analogy you gave there, splitting the solar field into three parts. Obviously, we know, or most know, that you get to know that the hydrogen side of things, it's you have to use 3 times more green renewable electricity to make, and then there's the loss when you change the hydrogen into the electric with the hydrogen fuel cell. So the efficiency is not great there. But do you know what the kind of efficiency is like for the e-fuels? It'd be interesting.
Something like 5 times worse
than electric or hydrogen.
You're using 5 times more than EV. So the energy, that's the other side of that, is that you'd need 5 times as much energy to travel per mile. But it's interesting on that front. I picked up a jerry can the other week of fuel while I was out in the Corsa for this. Just put some fresh fuel back in it, and I worked out that my 5-litre jerry can of super unleaded contained something like 45 kilowatt hours of energy at about 16p per kilowatt hour, which is cheaper than our home energy tariff. We have yet to switch on to dual rate tariff. But that's roughly the same usable capacity, the same as the usable capacity in the Rifter. Now, the Rifter is a 7-seat people carrier, and as I said earlier, it can do between 130 and 155, 160 miles on a jerry can of fuel. This will do about 40, and it's a real kind of, you look at it and you kind of go, well, I can pick up 45, as much as I can pick up 45 kilowatt hours of energy in liquid form with one hand, as compared to, I wouldn't want to try and do that with a battery. It's amazing how much further you can go with it in an EV. And it really kind of, I was like, I've never really thought about it this big. Our e-Rifter runs on a single jerry can of fuel, effectively. It really kind of highlights that, how much further you get to go. So,
is your Polo G40 modified?
Yes.
I need to know about this, because I know this is an EV channel, but I did say I needed some balance. I was trying to keep the balance here. So what have you done to the G40? I'm interested now.
So I should probably explain what it is in the first place, I guess, just in case people don't know. It's one that people either know of or they don't. So Volkswagen in the mid-80s decided to try a bit of supercharging on some of its vehicles. So it developed a small, thermally very efficient, by 1980s standards, but very, very, very fragile supercharger shaped like a G, and the fins of the supercharger are 40mm wide. They fitted it to the Polo generation before this with the round headlights on it, the Mark II, and they set a 24-hour speed record. I think it was 135 miles an hour average over 24 hours. And the idea was it was quite a fuel-efficient, high-performance vehicle. They launched it then in the production version as a part of the normal model range. It was a limited version in the mid-80s. And then in 1990, they added it to the rest of the range. 1.3 litre engine, electronic fuel injection, small supercharger on it. Made about 118 horsepower, and most magazine tests at the time said it ran rings around the Corrado G60, which had 60mm supercharger, in-gear acceleration, and it's only when you got up to the higher speeds that the Corrado would catch up with it.
Yeah.
This one is heavily ported supercharger, small pulley, larger inlet manifold, restrictions taken out all over the place. Relatively small exhaust. I've tried a larger bore, didn't really get on with it. I like the low speed pickup. Puts out about 150 horsepower, weighs 830 kilos, and things like limited slip diff, fully adjustable suspension, all the rest of it. It's
got slip diff on it as well.
Oh yeah. You need that. It needed that from the factory. So it's fun. It'll do 40-45 miles per gallon. I've actually come to appreciate how easy it is to just drive it in. It'll pull from almost idle, just kind of pottering around in town in fourth gear, and it'll just kind of pull itself along quite nicely. So it's a fun little car. Yeah,
no, there we got Foxhound Follies. You always fancied a Polo bread van as an EV conversion.
That'd be an interesting one.
My granddad had one of them, and my first car was a Polo, and I always kind of fancied a G40. So it's nice to know that you've got all the right mods. Sounds great. My friend had a G60 Corrado, and it's quite relevant, I suppose, recently, because I was watching Late Break Show, and there's quite a lot of there was that supercharged G60 engine in the Golf Mark 1, I think. So anyone's interested in that. I did say I wanted some balance. I thought if we talk about a modified petrol car that's just in the background, I think that's a good bit of balance. I think the main balance we were actually talking about was making sure that we weren't being evangelists, really. But, just to show that we're not.
I find myself caught in the middle a little bit, because sometimes I think people assume you've got to like one or the other. And for me, one of the things I love about modified cars is that you can take, you can sort of preserve the character of the car, but you can kind of update it with modern tech. And for me, EV is just part of the toolkit with that. So if you take, say, I don't know, like a 1960s Mustang, and you stick a modern Mustang powertrain in it, that doesn't seem to get people's backs up. And yet, if you take a 1960s Mustang and convert it to an EV, people kind of go, "Oh, you're ruining it, you're taking the character away," and all the rest of it. I know it's a further stretch, but equally, I just think it's all part of the toolkit. And actually, the ability to, some of the guys that I'm talking to who are building kind of electric hot rods are kind of going, I don't understand why more people aren't really into this. You can do there's so much scope for doing things in software and kind of really personalizing the experience and making it deliver the power how you want it to, deliver the power. And super reliable, super high performance, vehicles. And it needs the parts prices to come down a little bit. But I think it's really exciting next step for the hobby.
Have come right down in price. I wish I'd bought my 44 kilowatt hour pack this year, not 2 years ago, and saved myself about $4,500. But maybe I should get Ralph to map in like ridiculous turbo lag. Like, that would be highly amusing. Probably break the suspension at the same time.
See, I'm absolutely desperate to build an EV hot rod at some point. When I say hot rod, I'm just talking modified stuff. I want to build a high performance something, make it look almost completely standard, and just kind of muck around with kind of weight balance and all the rest of it in the car, and just kind of reduce it. One thing that'd be really interesting to do as an EV, and anyone who's a fan of these is going to be like knocking on my door with a crowbar in hand, I think, waiting to beat the crap out of me. But I've always thought it would be interesting to try and do an EV conversion in an FDRX7 chassis.
I love that shape car.
It's such a pretty car.
That is kind of, before I bought the Griffith that I had, that shape RX7 I nearly bought because I really wanted the RS version. I I love that car, and I've got a friend of mine who is massively in love with that car as well. I think someone has done an EV conversion on one.
I've not seen that. I just think with that you'd be able to if you manage to stack the battery modules where the engine would be, you'd be able to get it within the wheelbase. You lift the boot floor, stick the motor at the back, and you'd probably have something that would confirm, it would preserve the character of the car quite well. But there's something people stick all sorts of engines in those, RB engines out Skylines and V8s and all sorts of things. I just think it'd be a really interesting way to do it.
I nearly bought a V8 one. I was between a Supra Mark IV, an RX-7 with a V8 in it, and then I ended up buying the Griffith because I needed the space. The garage wasn't big enough. But yeah, I think that is a fantastic note to finish on. I think we've done about an hour. There's loads more that we could go through, and there's so much more that we are going to go through week after week. And I don't know about everybody else, but please make sure you give the video a like. If they've got any questions before we sign off, guys, is there anything you want to add before we finish up? And we'll talk after the live's finished, by the way, just so you know. You guys happy? Alex, you happy?
Kevin, yeah. I was going to subtle nod.
Yeah, just on that RX-7 thing, that used to be my go-to car in Need for Speed Most Wanted.
Oh, there we go. There we go. That's the official YEV car. So everyone donate as much money as possible so we can make this dream happen. The new dream, not the TVR dream. But yeah, we've got so much planned, guys. So in terms of Bug Zapper, yes. Well, yeah, Bug Zapper. I know, I've touched it. Don't tell Moggy. But that sounds weird. But anyway, guys, everybody, thank you very much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please share it. We're really trying to build this podcast. So please get it shared, get it out there, LinkedIn, all the social media channels, whack it out there. And we'll be here next week to talk about a topic. And I'm sure I'll put the topic out end of the week. If you've got any ideas, anything that you want to add in, just whack it in the comments after. But as always, thanks everybody that commented and put suggestions in there and questions. And a massive thank you to Alex Grant for joining us, and also Kevin Booker as part of the EV team. So thanks everyone. Thanks Foxanne, thanks for your support. And yeah, we'll see you next Thursday at 8 o'clock. Thanks guys.
Cheers.
I've just got to press the right button to stop it now. No, there we